Our speaker today is from physics and astronomy background. Very welcome to Abhishek Prakash. I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief introduction about his background. Abhi received his PhD in astrophysics from University of Pittsburgh and transitioned into industry after finishing his postdoc term at Caltech in February 2020. Since then, he has worked as leading member of Team BI, Business Intelligence, where he reports to the CTO, Chief Technology Officer. His day-to-day work includes, but not limited to, building and maintaining several debugging and monitoring dashboards, building and putting in production machine learning models to optimize sales, dialing, and purchasing leads. In addition, he also mentors junior data scientists and data analysts. Abhi's work is cross-functional and collaborates with several different teams, which include marketing, company operations, and sales operations, etc. In his free time, Abhi likes to help other STEM grad students who wish to transition to data science as an alternative career path. Amazing. Very welcome, Abhishek, here to our session. Very happy to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
happy to be here.
Our own PhD alumni. This is, I think, our first session out of all four that we are having a PhD alumni here. Very excited. I think in art session we did have, but that was like some music background. But in science, you are our first PhD alumni. So double excited. All right. So why don't Abhi, you go ahead and tell us briefly. I know in the introduction you mostly told, like I mentioned, most of the things of your current role, but why don't you just tell us informally, like how is your day-to-day life in your office, and how does your job role is? Like, what do you do usually?
So my role is slightly different from what a typical data scientist role is. And the reason behind this is I directly report to CTO. So basically, whatever he needs to get done, I have to relate it to data or performance. I have to get that done, whether that is in my skill set or not. If it's not in my skill set, then I have to assemble a team of people from different teams and get that done, right? But in general, when I was more focused on data science, it would be mostly producing data products, which is like building dashboards, making reports, talking with stakeholders, and communicating the insight that we were getting from those reports. If they have trouble understanding what we have presented, then or how we can make it better, what they would like in future and all. So day-to-day life is mostly meetings. Like you get up on Zoom and you have back-to-back meetings about your work. And then in between meetings, you try to find time to get work done. And then you have more meetings where you communicate the results of your work. And then we have our team meetings as well, which are more like internal meetings where we would discuss things like what everybody else is working on, what are the bottlenecks, and how we can help each other. So that's where all the mentorship part comes from. Like, you know, when junior data scientists and all, they're like stuck on something, then we'll say, okay, let's try to do this. And what works, what is not working, that kind of stuff. And then basically the most important part of the job is not coding or producing report. It's just being a bridge between business intelligence and other team of the company, where you communicate what are the requirements to and the results to both sides, right? So there is like no confusion about what are expected deliverables.
I see. Okay, we have Gabe here finally. Very welcome to our session, Gabe. How are you doing?
Yeah, gotcha. Sorry, I'm running late.
No worries. I'm gonna do a brief introduction about Gabe now. So Gabriel Dunn is a senior manager at Bain & Company, working at the intersection of strategy and technology. Prior to Bain & Company, Gabe received his PhD in condensed matter physics at UC Berkeley, working on a variety of projects at the intersection of nano device fabrication, nanomaterials, and biology. And he also filed 2 patents of his research work. He also worked as engineering physicist at Fermi National Lab for 2 years, and as DOE INFM fellow at CERN for about a year, prior to joining the graduate program. This is amazing.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you for the introduction. Excited to join. Always happy to talk to other PhDs about what to do next.
Yeah. Very happy to have you here. We were just talking with Abhishek about how does his day-to-day job looks like and what does he do actually. So would you mind telling us how is your day-to-day work?
I'm happy to answer that question, but I'll preface it by saying I feel like that's one of the toughest questions to answer at every job I've ever had. Even grad school, when you ask a grad student, like, well, really, what's your day-to-day look like? And you're like, I don't fiddle with some beakers. I go to a lab. I don't know. So consulting, same way. For me now, I feel like my day is more and more meetings. So it's meeting a lot with, pretty senior folks at large tech companies. That's usually where I focus is mostly tech, so mostly Bay Area. And it's meeting with the team. We're building analyses, sort of fact bases, just to inform some big strategic decision. So again, a lot of what I do is sort of semiconductor manufacturing. So a big part of this will be, what does the future of Moore's law look like? And if you're an equipment manufacturer or if you're actual chip manufacturer, how does that change your strategy? And so it's a lot of us either talking to industry experts, getting their point of view, talking to clients, talking to the team, a lot of talking. That's the answer. Again, I'll go back to my warning at the beginning of I'm not sure that does the job justice, but it's really tough to do any job justice of what does the typical day look like. Often no day is typical.
Yeah, that's more or less the same which Abhishek was telling us a few minutes ago. He was like, it's a lot of meeting going on all day. So is it like, do you guys spend some time coding or building your own code? Or is it like most of your time is dedicated in managing people doing that for you?
Was that for me or Abhishek?
Yeah, we can go in turn. You can answer first.
Oh, sure. Well, so consulting is going to be, almost no coding. So a lot more Excel, PowerPoint, and just sort of secondary research. The job changes as you go on. So I think at the beginning, you're more of we'll call it an individual contributor. And as you go on, it's more about managing a team, directing them where to go, helping guide people.
Yeah, for me, it's a combination of a bit of both. Like I'm an individual contributor as well as sort of manager and leader. So as managerial responsibilities and the number of people I have to manage and help increases, the amount I spend on individual contributing hours kind of decreases. But I still like to do some coding because that's what I've done most of my PhD in life. So it kind of gives me some sort of satisfaction of, also building things and all. But like it has become harder and harder as you go up the ladder in terms of seniority. Your individual contributing hours typically reduces. I'm at a position over here right now that, even if I build something, then maintaining that is not my responsibility. If it's a challenging project, I'll do it and then I'll pass on to other people to maintain.
Yeah, makes sense. So if I'm not wrong, both of you are joining your current companies right after your PhD. Is that right?
Yep.
Is it the second company?
No. This is first company, but not after PhD. I had a postdoc at Caltech.
Okay. So you did your postdoc.
But right after academia.
Right after academia. Okay. So what is the biggest difference you guys are seeing in the academic setting and in your work life right now? We can start with Gabe.
Oh, sure. Biggest difference, and there's a lot. I think probably pace is the biggest difference I see. I mean, that was one of the big draws to consulting for me was I felt like I have pretty bad ADHD, and I came up against that in a PhD where I loved the first few months of a project, and then the 2 years that followed that of like, okay, but really you need to finish it and you need to cross every T was just sort of torture. Consulting specifically is much more short term. Most of our full projects, so like engagement with a client is only a few months. And so it puts a lot of pressure then on pace where, really diving deep on something and, doing that crossing every T and making sure everything's buttoned up is just, not tenable. So you're making a lot more like gut decisions, informed gut decisions is what I'll say.
Yeah, on my side, the biggest difference is in academia, when you do certain projects, you try to answer as many questions as you can and, try to make things perfect before you think about publication and other things, like before you call a project finished, right? In industry, the focus is always on MVP. If y equals mx plus c, a simple equation of a straight line can do the job, then you make that and ship it, let it be in production and let it work. There is no time to, sit and try to perfect things. You just move on. Like my projects are like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, then it goes on to next thing.
Wow.
So pace is definitely one of the things.
I was talking about this weekend with some other former PhDs we knew from grad school. And I think a big part of that also boils up to, what people value in employees really changes for academia. I think academia is such a premium is put on just brilliant. If you can just be brilliant, that's what you're looking for. And that's the star pupil is just, oh, they're so smart. But I think like ability to execute, competence, all of that becomes such a bigger factor in any kind of industry job. I honestly think academia would benefit from it. There's a lot of stuff that I feel like looking back on academia, what I feel like I've learned in industry is, boy, I would have done a so much better job at my PhD had I done this in the reverse order. Had I did consulting first and then moved to a PhD, boy, it would have been faster. And there's a lot, academia itself could learn from that model.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, good to know now. Yeah, I feel like being a PhD student, we have this mindset that we have so much of time of getting this one thing done perfectly, but that's not the case when you're in an industry. You're pressure of deadlines and getting job done. That makes sense. Okay, moving on to our next question. What do you like most about your current job? And what is the one thing in your job that could be a difficult challenge? It could be something that you personally don't enjoy a lot, but work demands that as a part of your responsibility. We can start with Abhishek.
The one thing I like most is like when I go to bed at night, I'm not stressed about what I haven't finished. And that never happened in 10 years in my academia. Like whether I was traveling or I was working, it was always like, oh, damn, I have to send this edits on this paper. There was something always, not something, many things always that were always unfinished at the end of the day that you always have on your mind. Here, most days, those are like not the case. I can just close my laptop and, spend my rest of the day as I wish to spend, with family and all that. Things that I sometimes don't like is like, you have to understand that, when you are a physics and astronomy and astrophysics or particle physics kind of, grad students, then you're always dealing with some of the most challenging problems, which not just coding, but mathematically and concept-wise, right? When you come into industry, not all the problems will present that level of challenge. Sometimes you will just get bored that it is like, do they even need me to do this, and they can have an undergraduate or some other person doing this. I don't need to do that. So sometimes that can be challenging, but you have to accept that, the job is a job that needs to be done.
Yeah. So is there any scenario when you have to compromise on the quality of your deliverables of like the things you are doing and then just get done with the deadline?
MVP is always low quality. It is what works. As long as it works, you don't care much about the, it doesn't have to be perfect. So yeah, even if you can spend a week making it much better in terms of quality and all, but you have to always look at pros and cons. What is the business value you're extracting by spending one more week on it? Will it be worth it? And if the answer is not a very strong yes, then you do not improve from there. You just ship that product.
Makes sense. What do you think, Gabe?
Yeah, so first question was, something about my job I really enjoy. I think one of the big pieces for me is it feels like I get to punch a little bit above my weight with consulting. Like I get to be parts of decisions that otherwise I think would have taken me a really long time to be, in that room, part of that decision. I think a lot of my clients end up being, so because it's sort of semiconductor focused, PhDs in material science, physics, but they've been at a company for 20, 30 years. So I think, getting to skip a little bit of that really focused, narrow individual contributor work and getting to jump to these sort of bigger picture decisions, things that make the news, is super energizing for me. And I think a big part of what I was seeking out. As far as something that, it's more I come up against, this actually goes back a little bit to, that idea of, individual contributor work. For me, I miss building things. So that was grad school was, for me, I was experimental physics, and it was a lot of really building things, like in a machine shop, in the fab. So I feel like I've had to seek that out in hobbies instead, get that same itch.
I see. Was there any inclination in your final years of PhD towards consultancy? Like how did you ended up in consultancy? That's like a very different path.
Yeah, I think last few years of my PhD, I actually did something kind of similar to this, where I organized, we called it CDIPS, I think, a career development initiative. That was just exactly asking, I'm sure the same question, a lot of you are asking, of, what's next and what's possible? Like, what have other PhDs done? I think that's become a lot more common. I think most universities now have something like it, but at the time it felt like there weren't great resources for it. So we had invited a bunch of speakers in, and I think I was looking kind of across the gamut of, there's consulting, there's going the sort of industry track, there's finance. I think I'd kind of ruled out academia, wasn't looking to do a postdoc professor route. And then, well, I think we had one speaker come in for consulting that just kind of resonated with me, as someone who, it felt like they were speaking directly to me. And I think that's where it started. So maybe a year in, I started to do some prep for the interviews, and that was kind of all she wrote.
Interesting, very interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna give our co-host Emerson and Lorena a chance to ask questions as well. So why don't we start with Lorena?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Did we just lose you?
I think so, yeah.
I can ask Lorena's question. So, and let's just stick with Gabe. So, yeah, how did you prepare yourself for this role? I guess we just kind of talked about this, right? Like how you kind of prepared for that. So maybe, I don't know, is there anything more you want to say about this? Or we could just send it over to Abhishek.
Yeah, sure, happy to. And welcome back, Lorena. I think we got the question in. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's maybe two different answers depending on what we're asking. Is, there's preparing for the interviews, like preparing to get the job, and there's preparing for the role itself. I think I talked a little bit about preparing for the interviews, and I'm happy. I won't kind of bore people with that, with something as nitty gritty as how to prepare for interviews. But if it's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out. I think Yasha.
That's definitely one of our following questions, of like how you prepared for your interview and how you ended up in your current job. Like how many interviews you actually ended up doing.
Yeah, so maybe we do want to get into it a little bit.
Yeah, that's good.
Sure. All right. So yeah, happy to dive into that now. Yeah, I think the big thing for consulting interviews is it's a little bit, it's distinct, it's different. You do a case interview, and everyone's bad at case interviews when you start. It's not a natural muscle. I will say, I'll try to generalize this a little bit so it's not just consulting specific. My wife's a machine learning engineer, and so doing more of a sort of software engineer interview type. And Abhishek, I'm sure you'll speak better to this in a minute. But interviews in general are kind of a developed skill. And it's not something that most people are able to just sort of step in and be amazing at. And so, putting in time doing prep, and I think most importantly is this pulling off a Band-Aid of doing prep live with people. I think PhDs especially, we seem to have this inclination to read the book on it, search everything online because you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of someone. So I'm going to spend 6 months getting really good privately at interviews so that I'll knock it out of the park when I finally do a practice with someone. And the answer is, like, you can either be bad at interviews today, or you can be bad at interviews in 6 months after you've tried to prep for it. But like either way, your first one is going to be a little rough. So consulting is definitely that same story where I think you want to pull off the Band-Aid. A lot of it's going to be about sort of getting out of your comfort zone and being okay with that. But again, I think that early prep is going to be common across industries.
Okay. So was there like a timeline, like after your first interview, how many interviews you keep on going for one company?
Yeah, and when I say your first interview, I did mean your sort of first practice interview. Like, it would be great if if those bad interviews I was talking about weren't ones that counted. So like, do it with friends, do it with other people seeking jobs. It's tough to, people in consulting get really jazzed about the number of cases, like practice cases that you did, and you'll hear them talk about how many cases did you do to get this job. And I always kind of caution against it. I don't think it's sort of like a bad metric. You can do a case poorly 100 times. And so there's a little bit of a like quality over quantity piece. So I think that's another sort of piece of advice there, is you want to kind of focus not on just sort of rote putting in the hours, but really focus on improving. And what can this process look like that will, each week I will feel like I'm getting better and better at it.
Totally makes sense. How was your experience, Abhishek, regarding the interviews?
So consulting interviews would be slightly different from the interviews that you would be doing for individual contributor. And I'm assuming whoever goes into data science initially is going for an individual contributor role, right? And like, you'd hear many times that data scientists are unicorns, and that's how industry perceives you. That's just a truth. You're expected to know coding, machine learning, statistics, computer science, a little bit of all, right? But the most important piece of advice that Gabe already gave was like, you can either choose to fail at your interview now, or you can choose to fail 6 months later. But your first few interviews will always be bombed. Like, if you come out unscathed without any mental scars, then good luck, you did great. But in general, no matter how much you prepare, because it is something, it's like swimming, it's like muscle memory. You just get good at giving interviews. And I gave 10, 12 interviews. The first interview was really, in academia, we don't generally have these kind of interviews, right? So that was really my first interview of the life. And there were so many things that came up. And then I was like, oh God, I have never even thought about it. Like, I had an interview with Amazon. The person literally destroyed me on neural networks. And I had spent like, 3 months preparing for neural networks, and my project and everything was a neural network. So I was like, okay. So it happens to everybody. And there's all you have to think about is go with positive attitude. Don't be afraid to fail, because even a failed interview is like, it goes a long way in providing you success in your interviews. But personal advice would be, it's good to prepare by yourself, but the more you expose yourself to other people, like, we may think in our own universe that we are very brilliant and smart, but when you start interacting with other people and be open to not knowing about stuff. Like one of the things that I have noticed that have earned me a lot of admiration from my colleagues, especially is I'm not afraid to say, I don't know, I'll look it up. And so rather than, making things up and try to, beat around the bush, if you don't know something, I don't know this, I'll get back to you. Don't be afraid to demonstrate that you don't know something, because like more popular perception, it's actually respected when you say that I don't know. That shows that you're willing to accept what you don't know, and still being able to help, right? But yes, prepare and talk to other people, not get into your cabin and be quarantined while preparing. Don't do that. That will not
That's a
help.
great piece of advice.
Especially for individual contributor interviews, you'll see that the codes that you can write, especially live coding, is such such a problematic part of the interview. Things that you can sit and write on your desk, when 3 people are watching you, you will likely make mistakes. And then, if you're not used to doing in front of people, it just spirals downward from there because you have already committed your first or second mistake.
Yeah, I think that develops with practice. Like as you keep on giving interviews, you will get more comfortable.
It won't develop if you don't talk to other people. If you're still preparing in quarantine, it won't develop. That the feeling that comes into your mind, oh my God, I messed up. There's a syntax error, or I don't remember this function that I should know. And when you're used to doing it in front of other people, your colleague, it's just not a big deal.
Okay. So like in terms of the timeline, oh yeah, go ahead, Gabe.
I was just gonna tag on a sort of niche recommendation here. And this is for coding interviews. I know my wife found LeetCode really, really useful. I'm not sure, same story. But especially I think for PhDs, you're gonna be coming in lacking the sort of CS software engineer training, and LeetCode can help with a big piece of that, which is gonna be some of the live coding or coding part of the interview. That's more CS focused, because you're never thinking about how executable is this, the most efficient way of,
yeah.
And that's a big
data structure and algorithms.
Exactly.
Good to know. Good to know. So in terms of timelines, what do you guys think? As soon as you start publishing paper, when you are in your PhD program, when would be an ideal time for you to start appearing for interviews? Because we know that the first few are not going to be great. So we have to start from somewhere.
I don't think I would ever tell anyone that they're thinking about it too soon, too early. The only thing I would say is if you're like in your first year of a PhD and really gung-ho about it, is like, you sure you want to do the PhD? Are you like, maybe your heart is elsewhere? But otherwise, yeah, I don't think there's a too soon. I'm not going to put my foot down on a what's too late, because I don't want to freak someone out who's 3 weeks out and saying, oh, you're out of time, you missed it. So yeah, no, I don't know. It's sort of as soon as you can.
Okay. Yeah. I was just
Yeah, in
thinking
your
something
first
like
few years, you should be focused on acquiring skills, right? A first year grad student in terms of coding and knowledge, and whether it's math, statistics, or computer science, is a little bit behind what a 4th or 5th year grad student would be, right? And if you are in grad school, then you definitely are there to earn your PhD. So if you get a job in 2nd year, then you simply won't want to leave your PhD if you want to take that job, right? So focus on acquiring skills that will help you later in early years of PhD, but later years, then yeah, keep your eyes up. There's no good time. Now is the good time.
Yeah, that's a great point of what you can do early is, if there is a field you're really interested in, if you're super interested in venture cap investing, look for opportunities on campus. I think there's a lot more of them usually than you know about. I know at least at Berkeley, there's a lot of sort of hidden gems of things you could get involved with, clubs you could get involved with, where you knew exactly what Abhishek's saying, skill building, things that maybe you wouldn't naturally have gotten during your PhD, but you can sort of build out a broader toolkit.
That makes sense, yeah. Because being a PhD student, we always keep on getting new ideas, new projects, and it's like a never-ending process. And like, if you want to diverge into industry or like some other path, which is non-traditional, you need to really have that time dedicated to that task. And that's exactly where the balance is, which we find it hard to like maintain and struggle pointing it down. When exactly can you give time to this thing?
Yeah, so one thing, just what you said there of non-traditional paths, I think is a funny one, and it's going to become more and more under scrutiny. When I think back about my graduating class, I would say maybe 60% of them are in some way a data scientist or machine learning engineer now. So it's funny to call it like the academic path is now super non-traditional, right? Going into getting a professorship, like that's non-traditional. Yeah, it seems like vast majority is looking elsewhere. So it's always exciting to see programs like this pop up, because this is the majority of students are going to do something else. There should be resources for guiding that.
Yeah, and I would second that opinion from Gabe. When I was at Caltech, I had the choice to stay with Caltech. But then I was traveling to conferences and all, and I'm meeting people, especially people who have transitioned to academia. And one thing that struck out to me was I did not meet a single astronomer who complained that he was not happy about switching to industry. Not one.
Yeah.
And then I was like, it always feels like, the grass is greener on the other side. It did feel like that when you meet everybody. But honestly, I never felt or met anyone who complained about, transitioning to industry from academia. And that was like, when I was making a decision, I was like, should I stay? Should I go? I decided to go. And I could say for myself, yes, I'm happy that I made that transition. Like, I love astronomy. I miss doing astrophysics, but like day-to-day struggle is something I didn't want to do for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. I think this option of pursuing the data science path or consultancy path is still frowned upon in the academic setting. Like, you can't really talk about it openly unless you actually have a group of people who are brainstorming the ideas and like pondering about their future options. It's like when you are in a classroom or like in the office as Laura and I are sitting right now, it's not that of an open discussion, but it needs to be like that, because everyone is at some point, at some stage in their PhD, are thinking about their possible career options, which is totally fair, because we develop our own skills, which can be deployed to other things as well.
Yeah.
So
I'm hoping that's evolving, but no, I completely agree. I think old school professors is very much like, why would you do anything else? The I'll call middle school professors are sort of the sentiment like, well, yeah, it does make sense. We do need options for people who can't cut it in academia. And I think, the younger professors now have a bit more of no, I understand the sort of trials. Like, this isn't the golden path and the path that everyone should be going down. I'm not even sure I should have gone down this path. So it does seem like it's evolving a bit.
Yeah, I feel that especially it was the case, I would say, before my batch graduated, especially at Pitt. What I noticed was before, people who graduated 3-4 years before me had this challenge where they could not talk. But by the time I was coming close to graduation, all the professors were so open and happy to discuss those ideas and even support that, because everybody realized that, how many postdocs are actually going to become professors, right? Then there are not too many professor positions. So either you jump from one postdoc to the other postdoc, moving from city to city, or you go to a more stable position in industry. And I particularly felt, and I hope that that feeling you guys should feel at Pitt is, particularly I found astronomy professors and all were very supportive of students trying to do data science in industry. And that was good. I was really happy with that.
Yeah, good to know. Speaking of postdoc, Abhishek, you already did your postdoc at Caltech. So retrospectively, when you look back, if you have transitioned to data science right after your PhD compared to what you have done now, what would have been a better option for you?
I had the chance of transitioning to industry after my PhD, but Caltech was too big of a thing for me to not take that opportunity of being at Caltech. And this is something that I would never regret in my life. The 3 years, 2.5 years I spent at Caltech was still one of the best academic time of my life. And so much so that I almost jeopardized my industry career trying to stay at Caltech. I had 3 job offers in industry, and I kept delaying because I just love being at Caltech and I wanted to stay some more time over there. And then COVID stuck, and all 3 offers were rescinded. And I was like, oh my God, now I need a job. But no, a good postdoc is always worth doing, because in your grad school, most of the time your advisor is holding hands, right? Telling you what to do, shielding you from all the fire that might come your way when you do things that is not, top notch. But a postdoc really helps you grow as an independent individual, because your advisors are not holding your hand. You have to make your decisions every day about your research and how you want your career to shape, right? And I feel that postdoc was very instrumental for me in my current job right now, whether I'm being an individual contributor or being a leader or mentor to other people.
I see. Very interesting. What do you think, Gabe, about postdocs?
Oh, about postdocs? Yeah, not sure. I completely, agree with what Abhishek's saying, especially if you feel like you had a little bit more of a less independent grad school. I think my advisor was relatively old. It was a little bit of an opposite experience where it was not handled. He was established, had no breathing down your neck to a fault, right? And so it was a both good and bad thing where I feel like I got that kind of running it independently. It's a super tough question to answer. I guess what I'll default to is I often give advice at an extreme with the idea that the people that will ignore my advice are the people that should do a postdoc. So I will say confidently, oh, don't do a postdoc. But the answer is, the people that should do a postdoc are the ones that are going to say, screw you, Gabe, don't care. I really feel like I need to do this. Just what I think, Abhishek, it sounds like a few years ago, had I told you that, you would have said, screw you, it's Caltech, I'm doing it. And I think probably right call.
Caltech was just a very big gold medal on my resume. And like one of the things that I realized that when you have Caltech on your resume, interview you don't have to stay in line for long to land an interview. After that, it's equal, fair game for everybody. But to get ahead in that line for your resume to be picked up, Caltech, the label sometimes does help. I know it's not a very nice thing to say, but it's just, fact of life, right? Like, he's from Berkeley, so of course his resume would be picked, when people look at it, at least give it a glance, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's the hard truth. I would take it like that. All right. You're all already 45 minutes into the 1 hour time slot. I would like to open up RAM for people present here to ask questions. You can use the raise hand button here on Zoom to ask questions. Just unmute yourself and go ahead. Or you can just direct your questions to me in the chat box. I'll convey it to the speakers here, whichever you feel comfortable. Yeah, you go ahead.
Hi guys. Firstly, thanks for taking out the time. A lot of your insight has been really helpful, so I really appreciate it. I had a question, I guess, for both of you, which is, what did you do outside of your immediate physics? And Gabe, you alluded to this a little bit in terms of involving yourself on campus, but what did you do outside of immediate physics or, your postdoc at Caltech that helped prepare you or present you as a better candidate for your future careers outside of physics? So both prepare you as an individual and prepare you as a candidate for committees.
Sure, yeah, happy to answer first. And love the split you gave it of prepare you as an individual and sort of prepare you as a candidate, because I think that's a great way to think about it. There's things that are gonna actually make you better at this, and there are things that are gonna look good on a resume. In terms of things that sort of looked good on a resume, I talked about that career development initiative. Just showing some interest in jobs outside of academia was helpful. I had also done some sort of consulting projects for a group on campus. What else? And yeah, I'd done a other sort of internshipy thing also on campus. As far as things I did that were just kind of would help me as an individual, I think I started to sort of pay attention more to the business world. I got a Wall Street Journal subscription, so if you're looking to speak wisely about the business world, it's a great place to start. What else? I mean, I think that's the big thing. Just sort of starting to, whatever industry you're thinking, trying to get more involved in the sort of industry sources, industry press releases, have a good idea of what's going on and the sort of movements in the industry broadly.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Abhishek, anything to add?
On my part, what I think helped me develop a lot was traveling to conferences and presenting my work. And if your advisors have funds, or you can secure funds to travel and present your work, that would really help you develop as an individual. Because when one thing that I realized that during interviews, some places, as you advance in interviews, some places will ask you to, okay, make a presentation and give it to us, right? It should be where you would be talking about what work you have done and how it is relevant. While in my initial stages of my interviews, like everybody else, I did struggle in live coding and other stuff. But when it came to the presentation part, I was ready because I had like 20 or 25 presentation on my back. So I was like, even if my other interviews were like, 80%, presentation was 100%. And I was able to kind of, I never hesitated in, or like, I slowly build my skills where I could be considered a good presenter. And that really helped me in interviews and all as an individual. It builds your confidence. You can speak in front of the people and not be afraid to speak your mind. Be able to communicate complex ideas in a very simple way. And that is something that you'll have to acquire and develop as you present more and more.
That's great advice. And I think it's not just for the presenting portion of an interview. Like an interview in general is a bit of a presentation. How are you, portraying complex thoughts, complex ideas. And I think I'll loop back to something I said earlier about the sort of quality over quantity piece. I remember being struck by this in grad school a lot when postdocs would give job talks and practice job talks. The feedback that we would give was very, very much what's on the slide. We would talk about, oh, is this axis, should that be logarithmic? I don't know about that. And you would just tear that apart, but we would never make any comment on, hey, you looked at the ground the entire time we were talking, you seemed really nervous. We would never comment on that. And I think that's kind of a disservice. So I think towards that, trying to get better at presenting is push the people around you to comment, not just on, hey, is the slide all right? Like the slide's the least important thing is, am I presenting this effectively? And what could I be doing to present more effectively? And I think it'll help you for, other presentations, but interviews as well.
That's very helpful to know, especially as this year, hopefully conferences will go back in person, one imagines. I mean,
Sure.
I did a couple virtually last year, but yeah. But thanks, thanks guys. I don't know if anybody else had questions, but yeah.
Yeah, let's wait if people have questions for a couple more minutes. I do have a question while we're waiting for people. They can still think in their heads for a minute. On the Google Forms for the RSVP, I have a question for Gabe. So what was your transition like from working in national lab to being a senior manager? And what skills did you bring from working in research to your job now as a senior manager?
Yeah, so I'll say the national lab piece, I worked at national labs before grad school. So that, transition is not important. That transition was 7 years of grad school in between it. I think that the big things, what I flagged to new PhDs, one, that transition is the same transition anyone's going through who's doing a career transition, like a career shift, right? And so, it can feel like you're the sort of outlier, but anyone who wasn't a consultant before is going through the same transition. And there's a lot in place to, the whole job is set up to bring people along through that transition. As far as skills that I think PhDs are naturally bringing, the first one I always try to flag is usually the people that got a PhD in your class were they were the smartest kid in the class, right? And I think that's forgotten after 5 to 7 years of a PhD. Is like, well, why would we hire you? Is because remember 5 years ago I was the one that was always raising their hand and getting the answer right. I think that's the biggest thing PhDs are bringing is just brain power. Apart from that, like more tactical skills, I think both the research, ability to research something and understand it, and come to a pretty solid ground level understanding of a really complex topic in a day, in a week, is pretty differentiated. And then I think some of this is maybe physics specific, but there's some sort of specific ground level thinking, sort of bottom up thinking, first principles, sort of thought patterns that physicists follow, this sort of taking this to logical extremes, that's really effective for any kind of problem solving. Did I answer? I forget. Was that a multi-part question or did I?
Yeah, that mostly answers all of it. That was a really long question, I agree. Yeah, so if people have any questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Right. So I have this question about if there is a change in the culture or in the team dynamics, coming from academia to, in other words, the companies you work in now.
Yeah, Abhishek, go ahead.
I would say don't worry about those stuff. The general common sense, treat people with respect. Realize that, in physics, when you're doing a PhD, almost everybody has standard understanding of things, and people are always intelligent, smart, maybe some more than the other, but on an average, a physics grad student would be, among top of the intelligence ladder, if I might say. But in general, when you go into industry, different people come from different backgrounds. Sometimes various concepts that you find very trivial will not be trivial to those people because they do not share your background. So general, just treat people with respect and be humble about everything. Be always willing to help people and don't be afraid to ask help, because trust me, asking for help does not reflect poorly on you. It does not mean that you're stupid. It just means that you're stuck and you need help. There's nothing more to. So don't think about all those things.
And those are great answers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Krishna, I think part of your question was just also like a culture shock question. What's the culture like in industry versus academia? I'll try to answer this without kind of shit talking academia because I feel like I've done enough of it. But because I really did, I loved my classmates in grad school. But I do think like the actual industry culture, at least at Bain, has been leaps and bounds better than grad school. And I think the reasoning there is grad school, I don't think there's really attention paid to what is the culture of our department, right? I don't think there's a lot of effort to forming that and steering it. Whereas I think for industry, there's people where their whole job is exactly that, keeping a pulse on what is this culture, what do we want the culture to be, and how can we steer it there? And so there's real attention paid to it. So I don't know, I found that super refreshing. That at an institutional level, culture was something that was really prized.
Right. That's great. Thanks.
Awesome. This was super helpful. I think we're already reaching the end of our hour. Thank you so much, Abhishek and Gabe, for taking time out of your busy schedules. And this session, I'm pretty sure the recording would be really helpful for future students as well. If you don't mind, I'm going to just share your contact details, just your email IDs with people who might be interested in reaching out to you. Awesome.
Yes, please do. I'm always available. Nice meeting you all.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you too, Gabe.
Yeah, good to meet you, Abhishek. Good to see everyone. Sorry I was running a little late.
No
Thank you so
worries.
much.
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.